If you were cross-examining Richard Gadd, I would say there's plenty to go on here in this document, which would cause him probably quite an uncomfortable few hours in the dock.
Accusing them of a conviction, it might not have been a game changer, so to speak, for you or somebody else who's watching this, but it's a game changer legally to get you to the point where you may be able to get it in front of a jury.
She's entitled to feel aggrieved by the fact Netflix have branded her a convicted criminal to 80 million people. He was a serial, massive drug abuser at the time. You know, I'm not sure how reliable his memory and testimony about that period of his life would be if it was put under the real microscope of a legal battle.
Would this have all been thrown out? Is it really that simple of a semantic? Could they have solved the problem if they hadn't been so definitive in this is a true story?
Richard Gadd, the creator and star of Baby Reindeer, is officially backing Netflix in its mammoth legal battle with the real-life Martha. Fiona Harvey, the woman who is depicted by Martha in the series, is suing the streaming giant for $170 million for defamation, gross negligence, and violating her right to privacy. Netflix portrayed Martha as a twice-convicted stalker who spends a total of 5 years in jail for her crimes. Infamously, it was billed emphatically as a true story. But it wasn't true. She's never been convicted of any crime that anyone can find any evidence of. Gadd has now filed 21 pages of testimony with the court in California. In it, he says, I was surprised that Harvey appeared on Piers Morgan Uncensored. Although I've only watched certain segments, I understand she claimed that she was the inspiration for the Martha character and that she never sent me thousands of emails nor left me any voicemails. She harassed and stalked me over several years, and since her interview, other individuals have contacted me through my agents and publicists and said they were also harassed by Harvey, but all were too scared of her to come forward. As well as detailing Fiona Harvey's persistent stalking, Gadd says that he, quote, never intended the series to identify any real person as Martha, and that Martha is not Fiona Harvey. Like all characters in the series, he says, Martha is a fictional character with fictional personality traits that are very different than Harvey's. Really, Richard Gadd? Many millions of people saw Fiona Harvey's interview with me and concluded exactly the opposite. Not to mention the catalogue of similarities and real-life social media posts that led to her being identified almost immediately as Martha in the first place. As for a fictional character with fictional personality traits, that's not really how true stories work, Richard. And perhaps most importantly, this appears to be a tacit admission that Fiona Harvey was never convicted of any crime, a central pillar of the case. Well, joining me to discuss all this, celebrity lawyer Mark Geragos and the host of Popcorn Planet, Andy Signore. Well, welcome to both of you. So, Mark, a fascinating development in what is an ongoing fascinating case. I went through Richard Gadd's full statement here, and there's no doubt that he believes he was treated very, very badly by Fiona Harvey. But there's also no doubt that there's no evidence in his statement that she was ever convicted of a crime. They seem to have abandoned any pretense that she was. Does this really change materially the case at all?
No, not in my opinion. You looked at it from that aspect. I was looking at it trying and scratching my head, frankly, to try to figure out what the legal strategy was. Because as you pointed out, it seems to be an adoptive admission, if you will, or by implication, that she was not convicted, that on one hand, yes, she was stalking me and she's a problem, but no, she wasn't the inspiration for the, I mean, it's just, it does not quite make sense to me. Maybe the law firm has got a strategy that I'm not privy to or know some kind of a theory that I haven't thought of, but it's very, very peculiar, Piers. And I had similarly, coming from a different perspective, the same reaction you did to this.
Yeah, because it seems to me, Mark, that at the centre of his defence is I never intended this to be identified as Fiona Harvey. And yet it's crystal clear from his full statement that this is obviously Fiona Harvey he's talking about. It's the woman that he had the nightmare experience with, and in the show in which he plays basically himself, albeit giving himself a different name, he details pretty identically the process of stalking and harassment that he was put through by Fiona Harvey. And as we know, within minutes of people watching the actual supposed true story, they tapped in phraseology that was said by Martha, posts that she put on social media and so on, and it led directly to her. They didn't even try to hide it. So this idea that this is not Fiona Harvey he's depicting. It's for the birds, isn't it?
Well, it kind of reminds me of some old vaudeville or stand-up or Catskills jokes where the reaction is, well, it wasn't really her, but if it was her, she's despicable. I mean, it really is. A lot of times I see this in the law where people take this position, and it's not been a winning strategy in my experience.
Right. And Andy, there's no doubt when you read the full, it's like pages and pages and pages of this statement from Richard Gadd, there's no doubt that she's clearly behaved very badly towards him. There's also no doubt, it seems to me, that he's got plenty of evidential ammunition, which he outlines in quite painstaking detail in terms of emails, texts, voicemails, and so on, which I always suspected because they were so precise about the amount they had. So there's a clear picture being built of a pretty unpleasant troll stroke harasser. Should that mean she shouldn't win any legal case?
Absolutely. I'm kind of shocked how much you guys are defending her. Like, reading the whole thing, this woman is exactly what she's portrayed on the show. Okay, she wasn't convicted at the end. That was like the least important part of the show for me. As someone who watched it, she was portrayed as a stalker, as someone who was harassing him, who was assaulting him. All of this stuff is proven in these emails from Richard. It's kind of wild. I can't figure out why you're defending him so much, Piers. But then I saw she mentions Piers in these emails, guys. Piers isn't talking about
That's
it.
not
Piers
me.
Explaining to do.
It's not me.
You have explaining to do.
It's not me. Funny enough, I saw that and I saw your tweet suggesting it was actually me. It's not. It's clearly he's got a mate in the pub also called Piers.
It's not you. All right, you can confirm that's not
for
your,
the record.
The great app.
For the record, it's not me. No, it is not me. But you see, I don't think that either me or Mark.
Did she ever compliment your bum, Piers?
She probably would if she'd ever seen it. But she didn't, for the record. And nor has she ever bothered to contact me since the interview, by the way. So it's interesting to me. I mean, you think that Mark and I are defending her. I wouldn't categorise it as defending her, but I do think that she has legitimate legal...
Andy, I don't...
Yeah. It's not defence.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
guess
that I would
legally,
call this
they've put up,
defending.
it's a true story. Legally, that's where she could win some money. I think it's frustrating because no Hollywood story is a true story. Every celebrity story takes liberties. I'll be interested to see what actually happens in the law. I get the argument, but when I read it all and I looked at everything, I was more disturbed. He breaks down a lot of issues and talks about the emotional turmoil and stuff. And to me, that was really the pillar of the show, Piers, not the conviction. You guys keep talking about the conviction. She also falsely says that she was assaulted. He makes the claim that she did in the bar multiple times. Seems to imply there's several witnesses in that bar who can attest to it. There's witnesses at the shows that she denied going to. There's a lot of lies she's been peddling. So in the eyes of what's true and what's not, I think all this proof is only going to help his case to me.
Yeah, but my question is, but did you have any doubt that she was the inspiration for the character?
I mean, reading these emails, now I'm positive. Seeing the emails and all the typos, it's quite clear. But
that's what I mean.
The only reason we figured that out for me was because he wrote "to hang your curtains" on Twitter. She wrote that. He wrote that. That's a very specific phrase. And that's what connected everybody to her. He probably should have rephrased it, I guess. So I understand that legal argument, but I don't know. So he's supposed to censor the truth to this woman who harassed him his whole life and really caused this true story to happen. But now he can't use certain liberties.
Hang on. Yeah, but hang on, Andy, what you're doing, you're accusing Mark and I of defending you. We're not. We're pointing out that she may have a legitimate legal case because she was never convicted of any crime. And they've called her a convicted criminal twice. They say she was convicted of separate stalking offences and that she broke down in court and wept and admitted the second one with Richard Gadd. None of that happened. So from a pure legal point of view, she clearly has, I think, a very strong case. I also think that Richard Gadd is being... it's not I don't have sympathy for him. I do. I've had stalkers. It's a very uncomfortable, uneasy thing to experience. Most people in the public eye have had some form of obsessive fan stroke stalker, whatever it may be. And it's not pleasant at all. However, that doesn't mean that the person harassing you or bothering you or being a nuisance is a criminal. And the problem I had with the Fiona Harvey thing, if you read all the details, it's kind of riveting to read his statement. It's a lot of he said against what she said. Some of it he's produced evidence from messages, okay, but we don't see what he was saying to her. He admits that he led her on. He's admitted that for real. He admits it in the true story, which we saw on Netflix. The character in there admits leading her on, and that's what she says he did. So was there some kind of relationship? There's a very weird moment depicted in the series where he is pleasuring himself to pictures of her on a computer, right? That's not normal behavior from the victim of a stalker. So I think there's lots of stuff here where I have a lot of unanswered questions. And I would love to ask, I mean, Mark, if you were cross-examining Richard Gadd, I would say there's plenty to go on here in this document, which would cause him probably quite an uncomfortable few hours in the dock.
Well, we have to understand what's happening here. They are legally positioning themselves to try to get the case thrown out. I remember when you talk, or Andy talks about, the ultimate kind of decision, about how do you view her. That's kind of a jury decision. What's happening here is whether they ever get to a jury. So understand against that legal backdrop. And the idea of this skirmishing, if you will, was it her? Did I intend it to be her? Did we accuse her of having convictions or not conviction? All of that is in terms of trying to get the case thrown out on a motion to dismiss. That is a completely separate analysis from if she survives these legal skirmishes, and does she get in front of a jury to present her case? And is she somebody that a jury is going to say, yeah, I want to vote for her, I want to give her a boatload of money? That's a completely different argument.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, part of the problem, again, from the filing, Gadd says that Baby Reindeer is a, quote, fictionalized retelling of my emotional journey through several extremely traumatic real experiences. But that's not what they call it. They don't call it a fictionalized retelling. They literally start by saying, this is a true story. There's no equivocation. There's no nuance. There's no subtlety. There's nothing. It just says, this is a true story. And the problem they have,
Bohemian Rhapsody is called a true story. There's countless Hollywood movies that are called true stories. I just feel like we're smarter than that, for one. Two, it does say at the end of the credits, like most movies, some liberties are made. But I agree with you. They could have phrased it better. I'm not going to deny that. It is also a little it's a little my truth sounding versus the truth when he writes his sort of emotional truth. But at the same time, reading it all in context and watching the show, I would still push back. Are the convictions really what's defaming her? Because I don't believe people even made it that far to think that's what the problem with Martha was.
Okay,
but the problem with Martha was everything that led up to it.
Yeah, but Andy, here's where I don't agree with you, you see. There are lots of trolls in the world, right? I get trolled all day long on social media. But if I started calling them all convicted, but if I started calling them all convicted criminals, I'd have a serious legal problem. Calling somebody a convicted criminal.
Yeah, but I don't think Wray would call it a trolling. I think you're being a little.
You make it sound like a light thing. 80 million people plus have now watched this series. They're all aware that it's based on Fiona Harvey. They clearly made no real
her activity, her real life actions.
Sure, I'm not denying for a moment
some accountability for those real actions. I don't think it's
of
trolling.
Course,
stalking and harassing to me is worse than trolling.
Well, okay, but stalking is that. But hang on, stalking is actually a crime, right? So has she committed a crime?
So is harassing.
There is no evidence she has.
But harassing is a crime. It can be as well, Mark, correct?
Accusing, yes, but absolutely. But remember, the one thing you've got to remember is they're going to navigate, there's free speech arguments here. There's going to be all kinds of potentially anti-SLAPP type arguments here. Calling somebody a conviction or accusing them of a conviction, that raises the stakes for the presumption on her behalf to survive to get this case to a jury. So that is why it's important. It might not have been a game changer, so to speak, for you or somebody else who's watching this, but it's a game changer legally to get you to the point where you may be able to get it in front of a jury.
Well, and I can't deny that. Plus, it didn't help when the head of Netflix said to Parliament she's a convicted stalker. Like, I hear you both. Right. It is a problem. At the same time, when you read those things about, I'm looking at the sort of some of these things on, so pardon looking at the screen, but the stuff he's saying about his family, how she's like finding his yummy mummy on Twitter and looking her up, and then I'm gonna find her. Like, this isn't trolling, Piers. This is like a serious psychopathic.
No, listen, Andy.
I don't want to downplay it as trolling. That just, to me, it's not trolling.
Okay, listen. I've also interviewed Laura Wray, who was the Scottish lawyer, who also was harassed by Fiona Harvey. And it was clearly, A, I believed every word she told me. B, it was very unpleasant, the harassment she and her family. Her husband was a member of Parliament. He got terribly harassed by her as well. And actually, George Galloway, who's a quite famous British politician, he said he was watching that interview when he suddenly realised, in conjunction with the other one, because he knew Laura Wray, the lawyer, and he watched the interview with Fiona Harvey that I did, and he realised it was the same woman who'd harassed him. So there's no doubt she's had a history of harassing people, and I believe the people when they say they've been harassed, including Richard Gadd. I would also stick in my claw, I think, like most people, if she was to end up getting millions of dollars from Netflix. But that would be, in my opinion, not her fault. It would be Netflix's fault for allowing this to be portrayed in their own words as a true story, and then simply inventing the fact that this woman, who was not in the public eye, who was not well known to anybody outside the few people who knew her, that she has now been depicted to 80 million people as not only a convicted criminal, but somebody who admitted her crime in court, burst into tears, and admitted everything she'd done, when she doesn't at all, by the way. If she was in this panel now, she'd be contradicting almost everything we're saying and saying, I don't agree to that, I don't agree to that, I don't agree to that. So a lot of this is contested. And just to remind you, Andy, I mean, Richard Gadd, I don't know about how reliable a witness he'd be in court, but by his own admission again, and as he portrays himself in the series, he was a serial massive drug abuser at the time. He was pretty much a sex addict, having sex with anyone that moved, male, female, transgender. I'm not sure how reliable his memory and testimony about that period of his life would be if it was put under the real microscope of a legal battle. So I don't defend Fiona Harvey. It would be wrong, in my opinion, if she walks away with millions of dollars. But I do defend the fact that she's entitled to feel aggrieved by the fact Netflix have branded her a convicted criminal to 80 million people, when she's not.
Well, he did say in his own document that he doesn't think either of them are victims. He tried to downplay his own involvement. He does try to do that. I agree with you, and I agree with you. But the question I had for Mark is, if Netflix had just said, based on a true story, would this have all been thrown out? Is it really that simple of a semantic? Could they have solved the problem if they hadn't been so definitive in this is a true story?
I think that when we originally did this program with Piers, you and I were on the panel, I'm still litigating right now on various matters with Netflix. The thing that has always puzzled me, because they've got a robust in-house and outside counsel that they use, I've always been puzzled by that. I do not understand. These are guys who probably sit there and bill away 6 hours looking at the wording of various things, and I don't understand how we arrived at this point. I really don't. It's inexplicable to me.
And there is a suggestion, which is not in his testimony, but there is a suggestion, which the Sunday Times in the UK reported recently, that Richard Gadd did say to Netflix, don't call it a true story, because it is a fictionalized account of my experiences, and that Netflix overrode him and said, no, we're calling it a true story. Now, maybe Netflix, Andy, never imagined in a million years how big this would get or how popular it would get. And then we may not have been having this panel or any of the fallout that came. But the fact is, it became a massive hit because, by the way, it was a bloody good series. And Richard Gadd's an incredibly talented guy who I think, is having a great wave of success and thoroughly deserves it. But that doesn't change. None of this changes the fact that they may well end up in a position where Netflix has to give a massive check to Fiona Harvey for defaming her.
And to come around fully, she did write a lot of it. So should she actually get some of that revenue that's been coming in? And it wouldn't have been as popular without her involvement and the things that he took, the curtains and stuff. Any other person who would write that, WGA rules would get a piece of the script at least. So I guess that's one way for people who hate her to get justified with if she gets paid. But I just don't want to sit here and I'm glad we all came around. I don't want to defend her and try to, she's wronged. I think this proves, if all these emails are correct, she did wrong. I think he's admitted he's done wrong. And at the end of the day, I'm frustrated that she's been a victim in all of this. But at the same time, if anybody did that, it's Netflix's fault. They should have been smarter.
Mark? I don't think there was anybody who watched her interview with Piers who believed for a second when she was hesitating and trying to dance around Piers asking her about the number of emails and whether she had written that many. Look, she's not, if you take one look at her, she did not come off well in terms of what she was saying during that interview with Piers. But that having been said, that still there are certain rules, and the rules are you don't get to just call somebody a convicted felon or imply that they're, in this case, say they're a convicted felon with impunity.
But legally, would that have happened if she hadn't come on Piers? Like, didn't she do that to herself in a way?
Well, no, because by then she'd already been properly identified all over social media. The media had been calling her, morning, noon, and night. So the cat was out the bag. Just finally, Mark, we're running out of time, but just very quickly, what's your prediction as to how this ends up?
I've always thought this would be a business solution. That means money is going to change hands, and it will change hands after they rule on the motion to dismiss. This case is not going to, we're never going to see a jury on this case. Mark,
Andy, great to talk to you. The fascinating story of the Baby Reindeer series rumbles on. It'd be really interesting to see how it all washes up, but I appreciate you both joining me again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piers.
Thank you.